Welcome back to Split the Difference. I'm your host, Jesse. Today we have from Mind Brain Movies, Hope.
Hello.
Hello. And today we are talking about a pair of movies that I think everyone collectively agrees are good. I mean, I think it's safe to say these are good films. These are well-made movies. But one has a little bit of a problematic element to it. We're talking about West Side Story, the original film from 1961, directed by Robert Wise and Jerome Robbins, versus the 2021 remake directed by the great Steven Spielberg. This is the first time we've ever had a Spielberg movie on this show. He hasn't done
Has
too
it
many
really been the
remakes.
first time?
Yeah, he hasn't done very many remakes. As far as I'm
Well, I'm not.
aware, yeah.
I'm thinking even OG though. Well, we just did Poltergeist, and I guess because I was confusing his overshadowing with.
Yeah, he hasn't really done. I mean, it was believed he may have directed that. We discuss that. It was believed he may have ghost directed it, but it's up in the air. Yeah, as far as I'm aware of remakes, the only remake is that one of his movies was remade, The Color Purple, and I think even that film was a remake. Let me check that real quick.
Something like that. I don't know.
No, his film was the original in 1985, and that was remade recently a couple years
Okay.
ago. So yeah, this is the first time, probably the only time we'll ever have Spielberg on this show. Thankfully, his is the really, really, really good one. Shockingly, because I've been very mixed on Spielberg recently.
I was gonna say I not to say it wasn't good, but I differed from you where
You prefer
I
the original?
I it's complicated.
Okay, well,
It's complicated.
we will get into it. So for those that don't know the general story, you ever read that Shakespeare story, Romeo and Juliet? Yeah, this is it. It's
Pretty
the
much.
same story, just kind of transplanted to 1960s New York. It's the Jets versus the Sharks, not the football team, we promise. But it's two rival gangs, Puerto Ricans versus. Is it meant to be Italian Americans? Is that what it's meant to be? Italian Americans?
Irish American.
Irish American. Okay, yeah, it's Irish American. Yeah,
Mhm.
but essentially, it's detailing the kind of troubled conflict between these two different groups. Um, let's get into it right now. Let's just rip the band-aid off. The original film has brown face. Let's just get it out of the way. It was the 1960s. A lot of movies did this. They didn't want to hire people of ethnic descent, so therefore they put people in brown face or yellow face and sometimes even blackface. It was a common thing in films back then. You just kind of just grit your teeth, cringe, and get through it. You just kind of have to.
Yeah, I mean, just think of some of the old classics that are Oscar award winning and everything.
Yeah,
There was what was Gandhi, Ben-Hur, all those
yeah,
things they had. It was the same thing. It was very The King and I, all those. It was basically
yeah.
white actors in. Yeah, it's the downfall of the Hollywood system back in the day. But
Yeah, I mean, well, that's how they kept going. It's what they
yeah.
did. Thankfully, they don't do that anymore. And whenever it does happen, it's mainly done as a joke. The most obvious example is Tropic Thunder. It's there as a
I'm
joke.
the dude playing the dude who's playing the other dude.
Yeah, it's played as a joke. That's the point. And it's even unfortunately today, audiences are like, "Oh, you should never have done that. That's offensive." Like, did you not get the
It
joke?
was true satire, and
It's
that's
satire.
that is
Ugh.
sadly the one thing that's been lost on America is satire. And you know what I blame?
Hmm.
I blame uh the Daily Show and the Colbert Report not being on the air.
Yeah,
When
yeah.
once those were taken off the air, no one understood satire anymore. I
Yeah,
was
I mean
like,
they're still there. They're just not as
it wasn't the same as it was. Yes, the
yeah,
both shows have come back, but as a different way.
yeah,
It's not how it was.
yeah. Now it's more sardonic humor. The satire is kind of lost for the new generation. They just
Yeah.
don't quite get it. They don't quite get it. Yeah, I don't know if it's a failure of the education system or it's just ignorant people, but just
Yeah, a
whatever.
little column A, little column B.
Yeah, little column A, little column B. So the original film, I want to point out the one thing you pointed out to me. You said in the chat when we were talking about this, you're like,
Okay.
"Oh my god, these are about 2.5 hours." Like, oh, now you're complaining about the film's length. I'm the one that's always complaining about a film's length, and I actually was not bothered by the length of either of these movies. You were like, "Oh my god, they're both 2.5 hours."
I that was only because usually, like, when I watch them, I have, like, a week to do it, and because I've been so busy, I had to do it, like, in a day, and I'm like, "Fuck."
Yeah. So you had to do both at the same
Yeah.
time. Yeah, that I can see as being brutal. That's 5 hours sitting in a chair. That I can understand. Yeah. And also the original film, has an overture. It has an overture. It's just not really opening credits. It's just more like, "Hey, everyone sit down, get in your seats." The
Oh, that
big
that was literally I counted, it was literally, like, 7 or 8 minutes of just, like, the
Yeah.
screen.
I'm glad they kinda went away with that because we don't need those anymore. I
Mhm.
would take intermissions. I don't need overtures. Like, I'm already
Yeah.
sitting in my chair, you know? Uh,
And it's
the
not like a real if it was a actual musical going to the theater, like, thing, I don't know, like,
yeah.
yeah.
That's the one thing I wanted to point out, that the difference between these 2 movies, because 'cause they're essentially the same story. They're basically the same. There's a few changes here and there,
Mhm.
minute changes, but for the most part, they're exactly the same. Not exactly
Yeah.
clones, but it's the same story done in different ways. The big push of the original, and this is common with a lot of musicals back then, is that they were mainly just directed as stage shows on camera. Like,
Yes.
this is shot mostly from one side of a room, with
Yes.
the exception of the outdoor exteriors. Like, for the most part, it felt like, "Oh, you're just watching a play. You're
Mhm.
watching a play." Like, every time they go to that basketball court, you're like, "Oh, it's a play. We're seeing it from the same side of the court." It's very few close-ups. It's mostly wides, big group
Mhm.
shots, and that's fine. That was the style of the time, and it does feel big and grand and such, and there's a lot of overacting. A lot of overacting, because that's what you did in a stage show.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, but it is still very odd seeing white people in brown face. Natalie Wood was not Puerto Rican.
That I will say I will give huge props to in the remake versus the original, like, the remake, they actually spoke Spanish.
Hmm.
You know, they were
Yeah.
actually speaking Spanish to each other, not like, "Oh, I'm gonna put on a little accent and talk."
Yeah.
Like, there was actually, like, full scenes of dialogue where it was, like, nothing but Spanish, and I was like, "Okay, I really do appreciate this because this is how it would be," you know?
Yeah. The
Um,
original feels more the remake feels more realistic, whereas the original feels more like there's an artifice, there's a facade over it, kind
right.
of. Yeah.
And that I will give credit to because it's, like, especially, like, okay, you got real Hispanic actors, you actually spoke Spanish, you know, although I did realize that only our main character, Maria, was the only one really speaking Spanish out of all of them, but what you know,
She's not even. She's Colombian descent. She's
that's why I
American,
said
but
speaking
she yeah
Spanish, and she's the
yeah
only character, like I said, not
yeah
but she's the only one who's really speaking Spanish, but at least they're still speaking it,
yeah. It's true. Yeah. So performance wise, I would give it to the remake because the original, it clearly hasn't aged well. I mean, this was nominated for, I believe it was 10 Oscars. I want to say. Best both of these received many Oscar nominations. Yeah. Wow. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 Oscars, and it won 11 of them. So yeah, this was big. This was big, 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 big. Won Best Picture, Best Director. This was huge. Um, we can look back and say, okay, it was great in the 60s. Some things don't age well.
although, can I point something out real quick?
Yep.
Did you notice anything about the actors in this film?
I mean, besides the brown face, what I don't know.
So
Like, who's in there? Like, who's in the cast?
yeah, yeah.
Oh, well, what's his name from Twin Peaks is in
I
here.
was gonna say, so you're Jesse's like a huge Twin Peaks fan, and I actually
Yeah.
was like digging deep through the cast list, and there's like 3 people
Yeah,
in
what's his name? Oh god, Russ Tamblyn, played Riff, yeah.
but there it was more than that. It was like 3 people um in the
Oh,
whole
it
movie.
oh, yeah, John Astin's in there, that's, Sean Astin's father. This is one of his first roles, actually. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, there was several people that it was I was like, "There's a lot of Twin Peaks crossover in this film."
There's a lot of names in this movie, a lot of names, like, a lot of people starting out, a lot of people starting out getting their start.
Mhm.
It's a hell
Like,
of a cast,
like
yeah.
I said, I just thought it was funny because I was like, "There's a lot of Twin Peaks actors in here."
David Lynch has said he loves musicals. One of his favorite movies is Wizard of Oz. It's one of his favorite films, you know? So, speaking of which, we're on the verge of losing David Lynch. Apparently, he has very bad emphysema right now, so
Mm,
it's yeah, he apparently can't walk across a room without an oxygen tank, so he's not gonna be directing anymore.
damn.
So, yeah, so he was hoping to do a season 4 of Twin Peaks, but, I don't think it's gonna happen. So, but I'm happy where it ended. But anyways, the original film, the big thing that I preferred in the original as opposed to the remake, the amount of color and the flashiness of it, it's way better. Like Janusz Kaminski, who I worked with on that movie, If the shitty version of Where the Wild Things Are in New York, um, he's a nice guy, talented director of photography, very very skilled, but he hates color. And it's very frustrating watching the remake. I'm like, God, where's all the goddamn color, man? Like, why is it so just kind of drab? And like by comparison, the original, just the color just pops on screen, like people's dresses, their hair, their makeup, the lighting, just even the setting, just the sets,
Mhm.
the walls, everything just pops way more in the original. It's way prettier to look at. You know, it
I
just
that is what one thing I was actually really gonna agree about was, the color scheming that but again, also when you have a stage play versus like a movie, you have to have everything bright because you have to show up
yeah,
for the entire audience
yeah.
that's viewing for up close in front and the nosebleeds. So like it has to pop, has to be vibrant. So that was like an advantage, so to say, because it had to be like that so everyone can see.
Yeah, yeah, the bridge sequence where they're going to fight, where they're underneath the bridge and it's the basketball court and the bridge is like bright red. It just pops right off the screen. You're
Mhm.
like, "Oh my god, this is so beautiful to look at. It's great." Yeah, it really draws your attention. It catches your eye. And apparently, I read that this is Michael Bay's favorite movie. I know it's weird to me too. This is one of Michael Bay's favorite movies. I don't know why.
Come again for Big Fudge. What?
Apparently, this is one of Michael Bay's favorite movies. I will verify that right now. Yeah, Michael
Uh,
Bay.
I'm at a loss for words right now after you said
Yeah, Michael Bay loves West Side Story. And Scarlett Johansson calls him surprisingly sensitive. Okay, sure. I guess that was back when he was working on The Island. Yeah, he's a big fan of West Side Story. He loves West Side
okay.
Story.
Okay.
I mean, sure. I don't know what he thought of the remake. I don't know. I mean, he and Spielberg worked together on the Transformers movies. I don't know. But anyways, um, another thing I wanted to point out was uh, the chemistry between Tony and Maria. Um, is it stronger in the original than it is in the
Oh,
remake?
1,000% stronger.
Yeah, and there's some things I want to talk about when we get to the remake with that actor.
So,
Yeah,
I am also gonna say, like, I felt all the relationships in the original
yeah,
were so much stronger, so much more
mm,
played out. I felt like it was all I guess the way I should say it is the way it played out, like, even though, yes, it's all supposed this is the entire story is supposed to have happened in the course of, like, 2 days, 2, 3 days.
yeah.
Um,
Like Romeo and Juliet, it's quick.
right. Very quick. But the way they structured the first film seemed like it was so much longer. Like,
Hmm.
'cause it felt like these things have already been built,
Yeah,
whereas in the remake, it's like, "Oh, yeah, it's only been a fucking day," you know? Um, and like and there's actually scenes in the original that seemed so much better and stronger between Tony and Maria. The whole when they're at the dress shop and they're singing about their wedding, like, "Oh, my mother, oh, my father, oh, this and that." Like, they're actually talking about their families, you know? Um, Again, it just seemed so much more realistic and, like, thought out, like, they actually bonded, so to say,
Mhm.
not just, "Oh, let's just take a trip and I almost killed a guy. Oh, poor you. Well, we're gonna get married now." Like, no, they were actually, like, building to something in the original, I feel.
Mhm.
The same thing goes for in the original, the iconic song Maria, like, the
Yeah.
iconic
Yeah.
song. I felt like that was shot and played so much like, that still sticks in my head.
Mhm.
Like, the whole, like, slow, like, dim light, soft focus light on to Tony's face, and he's just, like, so pure of love, like, "Marie," like, he's just,
Yeah.
like I felt like that was so much more powerful than in the remake. I really do. Like, in the remake, he it's they're showing that it's a movie. It's, like, more grand scale, and he's going all over the place and blah, 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 but, like, because it was a stage play in the original, they, like, focused on Tony, and I don't know, like, that hit me so much harder,
Mhm.
and I think that's where I think I differ from you because growing up, I was a theater kid. I really
Yeah.
was a theater kid. Not many people look at me and they're like, "No, you weren't a theater kid." I was like, "Yeah, I was a fucking theater kid."
I did theater
Um,
for one year, and it was because my parents forced me to do it, and I quit after that. So I was like, "Nah, I wasn't a theater kid."
no, I was a huge theater kid. I remember my theater teacher, he'd always get mad at me because he's like, "Hope, you take all the classes, you're a great actress. Why don't you ever actually audition for the plays?" And I was like, "Yeah, I just don't feel like it." You know, and then, like, but I would always be there to, like, do concessions or I, like, built the sets or I did the lighting, and he's like, "You do everything else, but except act." Like, "What the fuck?" And I was like, "I just" he would always get so mad at me because he's like, "You're so good." And I'm like, "Eh." But I love theater, loved it. So, like, I'm super passionate about it, and so, again, that first one just I guess that's why it hit me more because I'm a theater kid before I'm a movie girl, you know?
Mhm. Yeah. That's fair. It's fair. So that's where we'll differ.
Mhm.
We're obviously going to say both of these are great films. These
Oh,
are both
yeah,
great.
like, they're both great. Like,
Yeah.
can I say thank you? Because usually with these with the differences, one's,
Yeah.
like,
One.
total shit and the
Yeah.
other is great, so, like, this one I'm like, "Okay, they're both good at least."
Yeah. So you got that. So at least there's that. So I figured we needed like one where it's like, okay, two fantastic good
Yeah.
movies. We needed a break from crap.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So uh in terms of the music, I mean, they're generally the same songs. There's some changes in the lyrics in the remake.
And there's also some
There's some additions in the remake, I believe. Isn't there a
well,
few additions?
like I said, in the whole, um the one song I was just talking about how they're
Yeah.
getting married and everything, "Oh, my papa, my mama,"
Yeah.
that wasn't even in the remake.
Oh, yeah, that's right. They kind of
Um,
swap things out. They kind of swap them out.
yeah, so,
Yeah.
like, they kept the iconic songs,
Mhm.
obviously. Obviously, there was, like, 4 iconic songs they kept. But the rest were, like, tweaked or
Yeah.
flip-flopped or switched, but, your main songs that, like, when you think West Side Story, it's West Side Story, like, those are the
Yeah.
ones they kept, though.
Yeah. The one I didn't care for in the original was when they're in the parking garage after the stabbing, and they start singing while all the car lights are turning on. I was like, "This is the one where I'm like, this doesn't feel like it fits here." That's the
Yeah.
one I was like, you're trying to escape from the cops, and there's been a murder. I think this is not the best time to do this. I mean, that's just me. I know, I get it. It's a musical. I understand, but just the logic in my brain is kind of like, "Run, motherfuckers!" That's the one part where I'm like, do it
Please
elsewhere.
skip this.
Move it to a rooftop, and then I'll be happy. So then I'll be like,
Right.
okay, now it's fine. Uh, yeah, overall, the original is a phenomenal film. I mean, problems and all, obvious brown face. Just try to ignore it. It's just ignore it. It's just the way it was. I think people were using brown face up until like the '90s, You just have to ignore it. It's just the
And
way it was.
and not even that, there's been movies even in the 2000s where they just completely whitewashed the
Yeah.
actors. Like, I know there was one where it was like a military something or other, I think, and Emma Stone played this
Oh,
one
Aloha.
character.
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah,
Aloha. Yeah, she plays
yeah,
a she's Hawaiian, but she has red hair and she's white.
right. So I'm like, they just straight up said, "Oh," or like the film We Shall Not Name, Ghost in the Shell. Like,
Oh,
I love you, Scarlett Johansson.
your agent's terrible.
That but, like, that should not have been no.
That movie's straight
Uh,
up racism. Yeah, if you want to see
yeah.
an interesting discussion about that, there was a quick fix we did for Film Rescue. I want to say like back in season 6. It's on the YouTube channel for Jaguar Sharks. We uploaded all the old stuff to the new Jaguar Sharks page. We go through all of Ghost in the Shell and basically say, yeah, this is racist. It's like
Mhm.
I don't know if I would say that the original West Side Story is racist. It's just this is the way they did it then.
No, yeah, it wasn't racist. It's just,
They're
again,
not
like you
stereotypical
said.
depictions. It's just they
Yeah.
didn't wanna hire ethnic actors. That's the reason. They just didn't wanna hire them. So, I would say it's racism on the part of the studio, but it's not racism on the part of the people making the movie.
Mhm.
So, yeah. So let's transition a bit to the remake. So Steven Spielberg, one of the greatest filmmakers of all time, probably one of the most important filmmakers of all time. Um, why did he hire such a problematic actor to Ansel Elgort? Why did he hire this guy? If you don't know what I'm referring to,
He
a quick Google search will answer that question.
the sad thing is, like, there's so many films of his that you love that I know, like, you loved Baby Driver,
Hmm.
like, so when all those allegations came out, I was like,
Uh,
"Ooh, uh."
I'll just say it. He was texting underage girls and making gross sexual advances towards them. And this is before he was cast in West Side Story. And he still got work afterwards.
'Cause again, like, there were only allegations and blah, 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 and it's, like,
Only
ongoing,
allegations.
and it's, like, an ongoing thing, but
Yeah. Yeah. It's unfortunate. It's this guy is and not even that, I don't even think he's that great of an actor. Like allegations aside, he just comes off like a blank slate to me, just like blech. Like, just I don't care for him as an actor. Um he's not even a great performer, honestly. To me, just I know they say it's his forte, but he just the original actor was just better.
oh, yeah.
Yeah. So
The guy who played Riff in the remake, I think he's a better actor, quite honestly.
yeah. Mike Feist. I don't know how you pronounce that. Uh, oh yeah, he was in Challengers. That's right.
Mhm.
I forgot he was in Challengers. If you haven't seen Challengers yet, no, it's a hell of a movie. Yeah, the three-way film. That's great. God. Yeah, the original compared to the remake, the original is a stage play, whereas the remake, this is a movie. This
Yes.
is a movie.
Spielberg makes sure you know it's grand like a movie.
Yeah, and this is, I believe, I want to say this is the last thing he's directed. I want to say that it was the no, oh, what was his biopic movie that he just did?
Oh,
Fablemans,
it's something
Fablemans, Fablemans.
no,
That's the one.
I thought he just did another one, like, In Time or
No, that's Robert Zemeckis.
mm,
That's Robert Zemeckis. Yeah, you're talking about Here. Is that what you're talking about?
maybe.
Yeah, it's Tom Hanks and Robin
Tom
Wright.
Hanks, yeah.
That's Robert Zemeckis, and it got terrible reviews.
Oof.
Oh yeah, they're like, oh, but the camera doesn't move, but we see everything from one perspective. It's like this is a stage play. This is
Yeah.
literally a stage play. You just filmed a stage play, literally. It's like just some things don't translate.
It's true.
Yeah. But yeah, Spielberg, last thing he did was Fablemans, which also failed at the box office, and West Side Story definitely failed at the box office. On a $100 million budget, only made $76 million at the box office, but that's because it came out in 2021. COVID was still going on, so
That's the big thing.
there's a lot of forgiveness on that one. Yeah, so had it not been for COVID, I think this movie would have done a lot better. I don't think it would have done great, but I think it would have done better because I don't really know who was clamoring for a remake of West Side Story. So might have just been a thing where I think it was because it has at the end for dad. This is clearly probably his father's favorite film, and he
Mhm.
probably did it as like a love letter to his father who had passed away. So I can understand that.
Yeah. Well, Spielberg has a couple more films coming up, so
Oh, he'll never stop working. Like
yeah.
he'll never retire.
I'm just looking at what he's doing like right now, and he has a couple coming up. So
He was supposed to direct a movie for DC. He was supposed to do like some air pilot movie or something like that, and that all kind of just went away when they reset the
mm,
DC universe. Which I'm kind of glad because that working with those kinds of movies, I don't feel like that's his wheelhouse. Somebody like a
yeah,
James Gunn can handle that kind of world. I don't think he's really suited to that world. So
it's just way yeah. Let Gunn take care of it.
yeah, just let him do it. Just let him have the fun. It's all good. Uh, the one other thing I want to talk about, Rachel Ziegler. Am I the only one that's kind of annoyed by her?
Annoyed how?
I
I'm
mean,
curious what you mean.
I don't know. I find her to be a little just kind of grating sometimes. I don't know. Maybe it's just her attitude from interviews I've seen her in. Maybe it's
I
just
don't.
I'm annoyed by her, but maybe not her as an actress.
Like I said, I honestly, I haven't seen her in anything else really. I don't know her for much else. I haven't really looked too much into her, so I can't say much about her.
She's in the Snow White movie that's been pushed down the road like 3 times already.
I do know that about her, but again, I haven't seen the movie. I haven't really seen any of the junkets. I haven't done, like
Yeah, she was
I'm
in
sorry, it's a Disney, it's a live action Disney film. I don't really follow those.
yeah, yeah, she was in what the hell was it? Oh, she was in the second the fuck is Shazam Fury of the Gods. She was in that.
Again, didn't say that.
Yeah, you don't need to. It's really bad. It's
Like I
really,
said,
really bad.
don't follow her. I'm sure she's great. Just don't follow her.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I wrote in my notes. Rachel's I will say this, the dance sequences between the actors is far more elaborate because it is a movie. It
Yes.
is big. This one feels bigger, grander.
Mhm.
Like it's big, big locations, big sets. They filmed outdoors. Doesn't feel like a stage show.
Yeah, like I said that, and that's great. I have nothing against that. Like that's where I think you and I differ again because I am a theater kid. I like
Yeah.
that I like the intimacy of how they did the original. Like I said, and I think in some of the um I think it works in some of the scores and the dances. I think it works a lot better.
Yeah.
Um personally, obviously, like I said, the whole Maria song, how that
Yeah.
was, like, more close up, I feel like that was way better in the original, whereas, like, it was literally I felt you saw more background than you saw more Tony in the Maria
Mhm.
song in the remake. Um, Another one where is the, In America song,
Yeah.
like, that again, that whole scene in the original was all done on one rooftop, very close together, like, just the girls and and their boyfriends and vice versa on a rooftop, whereas in the remake, it literally took over the entire city,
Yeah. Yes.
and, like,
Huge.
it's
Huge.
a huge number, huge, huge, huge number. Like, they were going down the streets, they were getting kids involved, there was cars, there was you saw 20 different blocks of the city, da 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 da, like, it was this huge, huge elaborate thing, and again, like, nothing wrong with that, and it was done gorgeously.
Mhm.
I just preferred the intimate setting of them on the rooftop arguing because I feel like that is something that would happen is, "Hey, we just got done at this dance. We're gonna fucking argue now. We're not gonna show the world, but we're gonna argue right here and now. Like, me and my girls are gonna show you up." Not like, "Oh, let's drag this down the street, but I'm in America." Like, no, like, again, nothing against it. I just prefer the original. Like, if you're comparing the 2, just those
Yeah.
scenes. I don't know.
Yeah, and I also
Again,
made note. Yeah.
Spielberg is big and grand. That's just what he does.
It's what he likes. Yeah, I made notes. The realistic color palette hurts the film because it makes everything feel a little odd. And it's true. Like when they're going down the street, it looks like musicals have to have a sense of artifice. The big one I always go back to because I don't care for it as a movie, La La Land, which forgets that it's a musical for 40 minutes. That and the music's not even that good. That sequence in the opening of La La Land where they're on the highway in LA, like it's like flat lighting. It's like
Mhm.
there's like dark shadows on people's faces. It's
Yeah,
like it
the La
doesn't look like a musical.
yeah, the La La Land, the actual story is great. The story is great,
Yeah.
but I agree, there's some flaws, but I do like it. I do,
Yeah.
overall.
Yeah, it's nice that a white guy had to teach black people about jazz in modern Los
I
Angeles.
said the overall story, not
Yep. I love how somebody called out Ryan Gosling on that, and he just had no response. It's like, I think he's just kind of like, yeah, I was paid. It's fine.
right. He didn't write the film himself, he just acted, you know?
He was just an actor. It's all how it works. They're a pawn on a chessboard. That's how it works. Uh, Also, I think that the inclusion of the rape scene in the remake, that's an odd addition. I
It was sort of portrayed in the original, but it was because of the standards back then. I know we always go
Yeah,
with
the
films like
Hayes Code. Yeah.
yeah, I know we always go back to the Hays Code. It was implied. It was
Mhm.
implied in the original.
Yeah. The remake is far more explicit.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think that was a big thing. Like it was easier to handle because it was more so implied in the original, whereas like because they were just like, oh, they're just beating her up. It's like, nah, well, there's a reason she's on the ground, but
Yeah. Yeah.
um also I feel like it's really interesting to see in the original um the shop owner, Doc.
Mhm.
He was like the main guy and like there was a lot of switches in that, like how he was like very for her. And then in the remake, it was a Puerto Rican woman, but like everyone forgot she was Puerto Rican, you know. And even at the end, like Anita, she was like, "You're not one of us anymore. You're one of them. Like you betrayed us," you know. So I
Yeah.
thought that was also a very interesting dynamic to bring in too.
Mhm. The idea of being a traitor, so to speak, within the group. It's interesting the power dynamic and how it's portrayed in the original as compared to the remake. It's interesting. I think both are valid in terms of how they're portrayed. I think maybe the remake is a little bit more realistic in terms of displaying the politics of the time,
Mhm.
because obviously they couldn't get into it in the original. It's the original. It is, for lack of a better word, sanitized.
Mhm.
It is cleaned up. When the murder happens, there's next to no blood or gore. It's very clean. There's no implications of sexuality really. It's just young love, but whereas in the remake they straight up hook up. Like you see it. It's right there on screen. They show it. So it feels like a modern update to it,
Mhm.
putting the things in that wanted to be there, but they couldn't do it because of regulations within the studio system. So I understand uh, changing things for the remake, and that, like we've said, we're gonna differ. I prefer the remake because I'm the movie guy. You're the theater kid, so we both have our valid points. Um, so it's a matter of taste in terms of what you would prefer to watch. But obviously, they're both 2 hours and 30 minutes. That's that. Like I do think maybe this story could have been trimmed a little bit. I do think that the story does run a little long. I could trim like 15, 20 minutes out of both of
Mhm.
these. I really
Oh
could.
yeah.
Yeah. I think maybe they just drag a little too long. Because in the remake, they get to the murder like halfway through the movie, and then it's kind of like, well, now what do we do? In the
Well,
original, the murder happens at the 3/4 mark.
that's what I also wanted to bring up. Things like how it was like how I said before, how it was structured, like how I feel like even though both take place over like the course of like 2, 3 days,
Yeah.
the it just seems like it was more streamlined in the original, like, the
Mhm.
structure of it,
Yeah.
whereas in the remake, they got all the parts they needed, but I feel like they, like, switched some, like, how they should have been
Yeah.
placed, if that makes sense.
For the sake of film structure, I
Yeah,
suppose,
but
drama.
it wasn't as, like, clean, I
Mhm.
guess, 'cause there was the whole meeting between, like, the 2 rival gangs. In the original, Tony was the one who's like, "Oh, well, it's not gonna be, like, guns and knives, I settled it to fistfights." That was, like, a big thing, and that, again, happened at the halfway mark.
Yeah.
Whereas the remake, they do it without Tony's not even a thing, I feel, in this movie. Um,
Yeah, he just kind of appears in scenes, then he disappears. It's like he's kinda he, like,
yeah,
shows up when he's needed and then disappears, so
um, and it was very weird how they structured that bathroom scene. They're just like, "Well, we're gonna keep one up each other," and then, like, I don't know, it was just very weirdly structured. Like, it
mhm.
it felt nicer when Tony's like, "Hey, why don't we settle this like men?" And they're like, "Okay, yeah, let's do this like men." Not them in the bathroom, and they're like, "Oh, knife. Oh, gun. Oh, this. Oh, that. Oh, bricks." And they're like, "Eh, just fists." Like, it just seems very off to me.
Yeah.
So, it was that again, just I don't know, the sequencing, I should say. Not the structure, but the sequencing. Like,
Yeah.
again.
Many of the same scenes are in both these movies, but the where they're placed in the structure of the story,
Yes.
they've been switched around a little bit.
Mhm.
Which, it happens. It's just maybe you don't wanna be exactly like the original, so you change things up. Maybe that's the reason for the change. They're just like, "Oh,
Maybe.
we don't
It's
wanna
not
be an
another
exact
clone
copy.
movie.
We don't wanna be an exact copy." It makes
Yeah.
sense. Imagine trying to do a modern day remake and setting it in modern day. How awful would that be? How this would never ever work. Uh,
Uh,
you could never do this in
no
modern day.
comment. No
You
comment.
could never do this in modern day. Yeah, this is of its time period, which is another reason I think that the remake also kind of fails is that even though I think it's a quality film, it's just like we've kind of moved past this story. I think we're all kind of over this narrative.
Well, this just makes me think of when we one time talked about chasing Amy, and it was like this whole big
Yeah.
thing, like, oh, being bi or being poly, and it was like back then that those weren't like options,
Yeah, that
you
was like it
know?
was you were either straight or you were gay.
Yeah,
Like that
'ca
was
and I
it.
remember like Seth joking, like, if this was made modern day, it would literally be, oh, I'm into women. Oh, okay, cool, bye, and then like
The movie's
leaves,
5
like,
minutes long.
yeah,
Yeah, the movie's
because
5 minutes.
right,
Yeah.
because it's modern, because it was told in a modern setting, like, it just wouldn't happen.
Yeah, some
So,
things are of their time. That's just the way it
honestly,
is.
it would be like, if this was a modern telling, it would be like the Bloods and the Crips or something, or like the Latin Kings and the 13, like, it would be more like actual gangs,
Yeah, imagine them
and
trying to sing this stuff.
but that's what I'm saying, like,
Yeah,
so first off, it would have to be modern gangs, and
yeah,
then second off, making those modern gangs singing, like, it just I'm just picturing it,
yeah.
like, I'm can you imagine, like, calling up some of these, like, modern gangs and be like, "Would you like to be in a musical?" Like,
Oh
just
god.
I would love I would pay to see some dumbass try and recruit that.
Oh god. It'd be like, "My best friend was shot yesterday." No.
Right, but it would be so authentic.
Yeah,
I
some
would
things just do not age.
yeah,
This is one
I
of
just
those
think it would be
things.
great. But yeah, so it's definitely a timepiece for sure.
It is of its time, and that there's nothing wrong with that. That is completely acceptable. Let me go back to my notes real quick. Another thing about the remake is that the remake feels a little bit more like a tragedy as compared to the original.
Yeah,
It
but
feels like there's this constant melancholy over top of the remake.
that's also because of the backstory of Tony.
Yeah, yeah.
Whereas, like, the original Tony's like, "Oh, I grew up not a part of this gang anymore."
Mhm.
Whereas in the remake, it's, "Oh, I'm out of the gang because I almost killed a guy and went to juvie." Not,
Yeah.
"Oh, hey, I grew up and wanted to get a job and go to college," which is a huge difference.
Yeah. Another big difference that I just want to make note of is that the structuring and sequencing that's also kind of fucked up in the remake. The "I Feel Pretty" song happens after Bernardo's murder.
Oh,
Not
I know,
the
that was
right not
so
the right place to put that.
tacky. That
Not
was
the place to put it.
so tacky, dude. I
Yeah.
felt like that was super cringe, I feel, when I was like, because I was waiting for that song. I kept waiting, and then, like, I was like,
It
"Okay,"
happens
but
after that.
right, I kept waiting, and I was like, "Well, oh, I guess they're just cutting the song." I guess because my initial thinking was, "Okay, maybe they didn't get rights for whatever reason."
It's the same
For
company. They of course they'd have the rights.
I
Yeah.
know, but that was the only thing I could logically think of until I saw it play. I was like, "No,
Yeah.
no."
And what bothers me is, like, there's no reason you can't just, like, pop that over to before the Bernardo murder. Like, you could put it there and be like, "Oh, it's a happy, uplifting moment," and then you get sunk
Right.
down by the murder, and then she appears after that. There's no reason you can't just move that
Ex
forward one scene.
exactly. That again, I was like, "Oh, I guess they just cut this I guess they just cut the song," and then just I was like, "Oh, ugh,
Yeah. Like,
ugh."
man, what whiplash. That was
Oh,
yeah, I was
it
watching
just
it, I was like,
it was
"Y'all
such
know that
bad
somebody just
taste,
y'all know someone just got fucking stabbed, right?" Like,
and
2
I
people get stabbed. 2 people die in the remake as
right,
opposed to the original, yeah.
and I get, like, the women aren't supposed to know they're at work, blah, 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 but it's
But
like,
we know.
"But we know."
Yeah, and we're just yeah, I don't know if that was a studio decision or if it was Spielberg, being asleep at the wheel, but somebody would have said, "Hey, could you like bump that one scene forward?"
Just one. Just
Because nothing changes. Nothing changes if you move that forward. It just doesn't feel awkward. You
yeah,
don't come
that
back
I was
from
gonna say that
murder to happy.
that was that's one thing I agree. I was like, "Ugh." Oh,
Yep, that's the one big, big, big negative. Is
I'm
like,
glad you
man,
I'm glad you mentioned that. I really am.
yeah, yeah, that's the one thing. So the remake has its flaws. Ansel Elgort, some not so great scene structuring, and some chemistry between actors, not great. But on the whole, it's still a fantastic film. It's well
Yeah.
done. It earned its nominations for Oscars. I don't know if I'd say it's better than the original, but it's more realistic and a more modern iteration of it.
Mhm.
So these are both great films, both solid, both enjoyable. It just depends on
Again,
your
it
taste.
again, like you said, depends on the taste because, you know, literally one is a movie and then one is
Filming a stage play.
filmed on stage.
Yeah,
That's literally the thing. So,
yeah. So
that's the biggest thing I could say is like, okay, do you want to see a play but on your TV screen or do you want to see a movie? Like that's the best way I could put it.
yeah, yeah. It depends on what you want. So just ignore the brown face. So. All right. So for our next episode, the penultimate episode of Split the Difference, we're talking about the taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3. I've never seen either one. I've seen bits and pieces of the remake.
I've seen the remake, haven't seen the original, but I'm
Uh, yeah. I know that the remake apparently is one of the filthiest pieces of dialogue ever delivered by John Travolta because he constantly swears the entire movie.
oh,
I
this
know
will be fun.
that.
This will be
Yeah, I know
fun.
that. Yeah. So that'll be an interesting one. Yeah, we're getting down to the wire. Only 2 more episodes to go until we wrap up the show. 2 more. I kind of want to do like a one-off uh three-way discussion right after Christmas because Nosferatu comes out.
I was gonna say, I know you'd been talking about
I
Nosferatu
kind of want to.
and
Maybe we'll
especially
do it.
anything with Willem
Robert
Dafoe.
Eggers. Yeah, Willem Dafoe. Yeah. I did see somebody pointed out a photo today. It was somebody said that he did a scene where he's surrounded by I think it's like 1,000 rats, like live rats,
Yes, yes.
and I was like, oh, he looks like a hunter from Bloodborne. Like, yeah, he does. He looks like a hunter from Bloodborne.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, maybe we'll do that as like a special one-off send-off episode because we had talked about because originally Nosferatu was supposed to come out earlier this year and it got pushed to Christmas.
It
So,
was. Well, and also, well, there was like a bunch of things because it was supposed to be Terrifier, Nosferatu, and a Jordan Peele film. Those were all supposed to come out this Christmas. But
yeah,
then like Terrifier got pushed up, Nosferatu got pushed back, and then Jordan Peele's film got pushed like another year.
yeah.
So like it was supposed to be like a Christmas trifecta of horror, and then that just like they were like, no.
You're gonna
So
split the box office. Like it's better just to
yeah.
space them
It,
out.
it,
It's
w-
like
it
this
was
is
smarter. It was smarter that way for
yeah,
sure. But I was kind of cool because I'm gonna be like, you know what? Fuck it. I'll spend Christmas at the theater. I'll see 3 horror movies. Fuck yeah, But now it's just like, okay, no, we're good.
yeah. So maybe we will do a one-off three-way discussion to wrap up the show. Maybe we'll do that because I would like to watch, Nosferatu again. I mean, that's 3 great movies. Like, come on, come on. We can't end with a dud because we have to talk about Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And we can talk about that remake.
Oh god.
We'll probably touch on the Netflix show as well, which is a piece of shit. Jesus Christ. We'll get into it in a couple of weeks.
So I was gonna say, do you really want to get me started right now?
No, we'll talk about that in a couple of weeks. So yeah, there you go. Next up is Taking a Pelham 1, 2, 3, the original versus the remake. Thank you so much, and good night.
Right.